Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar on drdemographics.com. I'm Scott McDonald, and that's my partner and friend, Mike Green. And we were off last week, and that was because I was kind of on a little bit of an East Coast tour. Now, let me just tell you a little something about Dr. Demographics and us in particular. We sort of believe you have to know the places that you're looking at. That's one reason why we really encourage you to actually have Mike come out and talk to your team when the opportunity arises. He's a good guy when it comes to looking at these things, but if you're going to build a $5 million, doggone it, you need Mike. And don't just assume that a quick and dirty report is enough. It's not. But because of our belief that we have to see things, from time to time, we're out. This last week, I happened to take a tour from the Rocky Mountains over to the Atlantic, stopped off in several cities, talked to lots of people, and made an evaluation on what I think is happening out there in the United States from, a worm's eye view. Now, granted, you need more input, more people, more things to see in order to say, I have an understanding of everything. That doesn't happen that way, right, Mike?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Mike. So
you are correct, sir.
That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. And so if you really want to know what's happening in life, if you really want to know what's around it, you have to get outside your door. I'm going to mention most of our competitors do not believe in that. So just to let you know, I have traveled to every state in the union, most of them several times. Mike has traveled extensively. So yeah, trust me, man. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and transfer my screen or share my screen so we can get into this. We'll forgive Mike for having a serious cold, and we're grateful for his presence. It's not the coronavirus, though, right, Mike?
We're all hoping. We're all keeping our fingers crossed.
Well, you are getting to be that right age, so
yeah.
All right. So you don't need to hear that out there. Now, here's what I'm going to talk about. Lessons learned from this trip. And there are a lot of things I learned. I mean, one of the problems, because we deal with so much data that comes from different sources, you kind of have to see how the data is being manifested in real life. And that's kind of what we saw. So, for example, are people traveling on airplanes? Well, the answer is, yeah, they are, absolutely. Are they all business people or private travel or whatever? Yeah, it's still mixed. So I'll say that was a little bit of a surprise in just how many people were flying. We also traveled extensively by car, and I have to tell you, the amount of surface street traffic surprised me a little bit, because you keep hearing, no one's leaving, no one's doing anything. And most of those anecdotal evidences and proofs that people give of that are frankly wrong. So I want to make sure you understand our philosophy. Nothing beats having boots on the ground, meaning, in short, you got to have that management by walking around, as Tom Peterson once said. Now, the trip was from the Rockies to the Southeast U.S. Obviously, a lot of it was by air, but a lot of it was by car too. And once we got into the area, I kind of kept notes. During these trips, I almost always do the same thing that I want you to do. I want you to talk to realtors, brokers. I want you to talk to shop owners, other doctors, not just doctors in your field, and even people who are researchers who know what's going on locally. The local knowledge is huge. And as you might know, I was born without a filter. I would go up to people who I didn't even know when I was a little boy, and I would just talk to them. Drove my parents crazy, but they recognize that there's a certain benefit of having someone who'll do that. Now, as for driving and shopping, my management by wandering around method has worked out very, very well. Ultimately, my job, or what I consider my job, is to get to know things that other people may not know or may not have access to knowing. So that's why I ask a lot of questions. A lot. Now, let me tell you the number one thing I learned. First thing I should say. What's going on right now isn't what you have been told. Now, you're going to say, well, what are you talking about? I'll say this. Guys, if you happen to be paying attention only to television and limited radio, news and stories like that, you're going to find almost all the information is coming out of New York City and Washington, D.C. Does anybody see a problem with that? Yeah, me too, because their point of view is so skewed as to be a little bit scary just how biased, and I'm not saying in a bad way, but just biased people are in reporting what's happening. You'll also notice that so much happens in the West Coast, meaning specifically California. Now, I'm from California. I always assumed that was normal, but in reality, what happens in California isn't what's happening in other parts of the country. That's why I'm saying, first of all, what you have been told, well, as Porgy and Bess says, it tain't necessarily so. Now, woe, doom, and destruction are certainly happening, but just not everywhere. In fact, what I thought was kind of interesting in talking to people is I would ask them how much they're aware of how COVID, an economic downturn, national news stories, were these things mattering to them? Tell me what the riots mean to you. And do you know what the number one answer I heard from people was? What riots? I don't know about riots. Now, if you happen to be in Seattle, if you happen to be in Portland, Oregon, or even Los Angeles, you may think, oh, there's riots. You may have heard about this in Chicago. You may hear about it in New York City. But most of the United States is not overburdened by the woe, doom, and destruction everybody else is talking about. And therefore, the data is telling us the recovery is going on in places you may not even have thought about. There are a lot of people shopping and going to work and traveling, and they're not worried. The other thing I want you to understand is perspective is going to be different. Regional and national perspective is what is lacking. So if someone says this is what's happening in the United States, COVID is killing everybody, you kind of go, really? Because based on the states I went to, it was not at all unusual for them to say, yeah, we had about 38 people die last month, and all of them were in their 90s. Well, that is not representational of everybody. Neither is the fear and the concern that people had. Yeah, there are some people who are worried, but not everybody. When you talk about those guys who had the gym, the exercise place, that had to be closed down by the governor and this mayor, and it was all a big deal, most people don't know a thing about it, and most places are not so hostile toward business. I was surprised, in fact, how many people just kind of went, well, I don't know much about that firsthand. So perspective matters when you're doing market research. It isn't such a big deal in some places, and in other places, these stories are very big. Now, you have to be aware or a little cautious when people have an agenda. There are some people who believe certain stories to be true, and the fact is they have a reason for sharing certain things. So, for example, in Hawaii, in a conversation I had with a guy, there were people who were saying Hawaii is doomed. We're doomed. And others were saying, I haven't seen a single case of illness yet. And that's because they're islands. And in the islands in Hawaii, it's not what you think. It's also true that in the various cities in Florida that I went to, some people were very concerned and some people not at all. But be careful that there are people who are realtors or brokers who are trying to, laugh off certain problems. But worse, in fact, were politicians and government institutions who have an agenda trying to say things are terrible and we're all going to die because they have an agenda. Now, one fact I kind of was reminded about, and that is people generally want to work. Kids want to go to school. They want to shop. They want to eat out. They want to have a normal life. They are not interested in pausing their life like some sort of a speed bump. And I'm sure you already know all this. Many doctors wanted to reopen their practices a couple of months ago, but couldn't because of the government. But kind of between us, I found a lot of people did. They were seeing patients, they were taking care of emergencies, they had lots of ways of justifying it. But the thing is, a lot of people felt like the necessities of life meant that they were going to do things and not tell everybody else or publicize it so that it made the newspapers. And that's part of the story. America is opening with or without politicians. And I have a thorough belief in this. You guys, if you're not doing any advertising or market research or planning, you doctors are falling behind because there are a lot of people out there who are. Now, one of the interesting things I noticed is how many people are so convinced in one geographic area that nothing is working for them. Everything's going to die. And other people in a very nearby geographic area are saying, whatever, we're fine. Now, those attitudes are almost neighborhood by neighborhood, but also social class to social class or group by group. They just don't hear or think about what everybody else is doing. And the political class seems to be that group of people that has an agenda. You guys, politicians are not like normal people. Now, here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. All right, these 5 points. Babies are going to be born, whether or not it's in a timely way, at a good time of day or night or of the year, but babies are being born. People are getting married. And yes, in our family, we had a baby born not too long ago, and people are, in fact, getting married. I had a daughter got married. Doctors are opening new practices, whether you like it or not, whether you're aware of it or not. But the problem is, I think a lot of doctors are not aware of what their colleagues are doing. And I'm just warning you, a lot of people are moving forward. You should be too. Doctors are opening new practices. Now, there is kind of a common belief that somehow the economy is stalled, nothing's happening, nobody's doing anything. Firsthand knowledge tells me that isn't right. So I drove around some big cities, kind of just looking for doctors' offices in the areas that we refer to as the Pill Hill. And yes, there's a lot going on that media isn't covering. Patients are being treated. Homes are being bought and sold. In talking to a few realtors, I asked, tell me about the inventory. Tell me what's going on. A lot of people went, well, I'm not really supposed to talk about this. I heard that a lot. I'm not supposed to really talk about this a lot, but I've got more people right now who are thinking about buying and selling a home than I have in years. And I believe that same thing is true of practices. So please, shake yourself a little bit and get on the shtick, because you're going to be left behind if you don't. Now, lesson number 2. Demographic shifts are going on right under your nose. And part of it is, I don't think people want to acknowledge what the shifts are and how they're changing. Now, let me just give you a real quick summary of some of these. Between March 1st and May 1st, we found 420 people left New York City. Now, that is gross. I mean, people are not coming to New York City. This is entirely leaving by percentage. They're gone. Now, between May 1st and about July 1st, we found that number is a little bit higher than 420,000. Now, I'm only talking about one major city, and they've been tracking this closely. But the same thing's going on in Chicagoland. Chicago is emptying out. It's like a piggy bank. You're taken upside down and shaking. We've also found so many for sale signs going on in Los Angeles. Now, you can say Los Angeles, but I really mean right now Southern California. And that would be San Diego County, Riverside County, Los Angeles, Orange County. Guys, there are a lot of people who are getting out of Los Angeles. And I'm going to talk about how we know this in just a minute. But let's talk about Portland, Oregon. You know that there's lots of unrest going on in Portland, and what's happening there is serious. But it's as though the city center of Portland is really where people are leaving, not all over Greater Portland. Now, Greater Portland is right along the river, But there are parts of Oregon that are just about 15 miles south of Portland that are still trying to say, we don't see it. I mean, we hear about it, but we just don't see it. And I found that to be kind of remarkable. Demographic shifts under your nose. Now, Seattle has got a different uh, structure. It's a different kind of city than Portland. But we've noticed that a lot of places in Portland are still doing terribly. And compared to Seattle, they're doing, it's awful. But Seattle has got its problems in certain neighborhoods, but not everywhere. And if we look at Minnesota and we look at Michigan, the same thing is going on. We have places where people are coming and going and shifting and moving around. And I don't know if anybody's paying as much attention to them perhaps as they ought to. Now you're saying, how do you know this, Scott? Because the media isn't reporting it. And certainly it's been too recent for all these demographic companies to come up with it. Well, I'm going to give you a little secret about what we do in demographic companies. There are two databases that are used, the Ryder rental truck and the U-Haul rental data. Now, these are available to demographers, and they show in real time how many people are moving this weekend and where they're going and where they're coming from. We know how many of them are one-way rentals and how many are local round trips. We're finding a higher percentage of one-way rentals going on in some places than ever before. Now, that's good news, I suppose, for the truck rental companies. But just keep in mind, the data isn't just who's renting or that renting is going on, but rather where people are going and where they're coming from, because the rates of rental are highly dependent upon what the demand is. So I'm going to challenge all of you viewers. I want you to go out to one of these rental car agencies and I want you to say, hey, where is it hard to get a truck to and from? Talk to them. Now, unfortunately, the truth is most of these guys are so crazy busy on weekends, you're really wiser to go in on a Tuesday or a Wednesday and talk to them about it. But they'll have the data and they'll share with you. Now, doctor and staff hiring trends are robust, but distended. Now, here's what I'm saying. There's some cities that you can't get any medical or dental staff at all to work for you at any price. They've been hired by other places, and I'm finding this to be a little bit unusual. I thought it was going to be not likely, but it is. There are some places that hiring new doctors is going to be hard. Young doctors are not necessarily thinking quite like they used to when it came to opportunities to work. So all I'm saying by this is, guys, you have to keep track of your own local research. And by asking around and by looking at who's hiring and who's not, you're going to find out where people are going and what's going on. You may find that some large cities are having the biggest problem of trying to get people to move there. Smaller and mid-sized towns are having an easier time very often with professionals, including staff. Now, parts of the US are doing great, and I want to share some places that may or may not be doing fantastic. Oregon and Washington, as states, have not lost population. I kind of thought they were. No, actually, what they're doing is they're finding some parts of the state, particularly in the major towns, that are having a problem. If you go down to Eugene, Springfield, and Bend, Oregon, they're doing fine. And in fact, looking for practices for sale that are being purchased and sold. Guys, there's stuff going on, but it's very localized. Northern and Central Florida right now is doing crazy well. Now, I'm saying that on both coasts, east and west of Florida, I'm tracking some very good growth. And this is going to be true for Jacksonville and even for Tallahassee, would surprise me. And by the way, if you haven't ever had the pleasure of going to Florida in the middle of August, well, it's an adventure. But we're also seeing that Texas and Oklahoma, and I'm saying Oklahoma too, are doing very well. Now, there are two kinds of growth, just to remind you. One is natural growth, which means babies being born. And then there's migrant growth, people coming from some other location. Most of Texas has a pretty healthy natural growth rate. Oklahoma too. But we're seeing right now, so many people are coming from out of state, surprisingly so. So if you're worried about going there and say, well, will they like a person of my ethnic or racial group? Will they care if I happen to be from this location? The answer is no. They're pretty well used to people coming from other places. Now, what I wasn't quite prepared for was Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Now, Idaho, I've talked about in the past, and this is mainly Western Idaho, Boise. But I was surprised to find out in almost all parts of Idaho, and this goes down to Idaho Falls. Look, there's a lot going on in these states. And the cities, while they haven't doubled in size, are certainly increasing in their percentage of people from out of state moving in. Not natural growth, but rather immigrant growth. And Montana and Wyoming have always been so small that people have kind of went, well, there's nothing really there, except the COVID-19 pandemic has made it so that you can have a very nice big old house if it has good internet connections, and you can run any kind of business from there at a fraction of the cost of larger, more densely populated areas. Now, I'm not Montana and Wyoming, but I'm going to say for a lot of you who've thought about it in the past, I want to think about it again. And the same thing is going to be true of Utah and Colorado. Now, northern Utah is really what everybody has thought about, and that's mainly Salt Lake City down to Payson. But if you look up right now in Logan of what's going on, looking much better than it had before. Southern Utah, the St. George, Cedar City area, doing a bit of a boom. Colorado has always been a mixed bag. I don't love Denver. I've told you that before. A little too crowded, and I've always worried about competition ratios. But if you look at the Colorado Springs, or you look even further north into the place right along the slope, I'm seeing Colorado has got a lot of people who are coming from other states who are loving the freedom and loving the idea you can purchase a home for fairly little amount and have it really work in your best interest. Now, Indiana surprised me. I don't love Indiana, I'm going to tell you, especially when it comes to, well, let's just say northern Indiana has always been a little bit of a depressing place. If you look at all over the state right now, there's a lot of revitalization, new towns are kind of springing up, and infrastructure. Iowa has also been doing remarkably well. But this is going to be true for Nebraska, Kansas, and much of the Midwest that otherwise people would consider flyover country. So guys, I'm just saying, if you're looking for some place to go that may not be already picked over and very expensive, Indiana, Iowa, and the rest of the Midwest is looking pretty good. And last, I want to bring up the Deep South. Now, with the exception perhaps of Alabama, much of the Deep South has surprised people with where people have wanted to go. Weather is warm, as you know. Educational attainment is not high, but the costs of living and doing business in the Deep South, which includes, by the way, northern Florida, as well as those other deep southern states, are doing pretty well. So I'm just saying, guys, reality's catching up with everybody. Now, I want to talk about woke what? Now, there are media sparkles out there. People are going, oh, this is what's really going on. And the truth is, they're not. If it bleeds, it leads. And if there's a bomb, people love it. It's what I refer to as the shiny object syndrome. So a lot of people are saying if something's happening, they want to hear about it. You guys, be very careful when anybody says, this is a woke area. Because in reality, it just means that the government may be taking kind of control of things. And woke is another word for control. And government control is very high in woke areas. People who are activists kind of believe that everything they say and do is really important, really vital, and they're talking about storming the Bastille. So activists are putting out a lot of messages out there in the media. I'd be very, very careful about believing any of that activism stuff. There is, however, some momentum for growth and change. Some is real and some is fake. Right now, part of what we're trying to do is to separate one from the other. Some places may look like there's big deals, but I'm being very cautious. I also believe that a lot of activists are being distracted from reality. And I mean by that, look, there's a lot of people who are getting married, who have babies, who are starting school. Starting school is big right now. One of the reasons that so many doctors are considering opening practices and moving is because of their own families and their own living. And well, now's the time to kind of consider that. Guys, consider that. The last lesson I want to talk about is the new thing. There are new things that are going to come that are going to displace almost every headline that you're hearing right now. Sports is back. Baseball, basketball. I'm not a lover of these sports, but the truth is a lot of people are saying, well, finally, it's back. And that's distracting people. Politics is back. We've got national conventions. And for a certain class of people, that's a very big deal. I don't think it's going to be as big either in sports or in politics as it normally would be, but trust me, there are going to be things that are going to force headlines to change. Movies are coming back. And I'm expecting that in September and October, we're going to have lots of distractions that we haven't had for a while. The new thing is coming. And I say that because I'd be very careful right now making too many plans just upon headlines. Now, Lily is my granddaughter. She is 10 months old and she's walking. And you may go, why is this a new thing? Why are you adding this? It's because right now in our family's life, that's a big deal. Lily can walk. Lily is carrying things around the house and wanting to show everybody the little thing she just found. It's a lot of fun. But, as for news stories of riots and political turmoil and stuff, that takes a back seat to Lily walking. And that's probably true in your life as well. Just remember, the new thing may be very small and very personal. The news cycle is new again. We have gone for a long time in which the news cycle was going for about 3 or 4 months and it hadn't changed. It's going to change in the next month or two. Just trust me on that. And therefore worry a little less. So what is new? A couple of quick things. North and South Dakota is new. North and South Carolina, that's new. There is going to be another baby boom. That's new. There probably will be a war. I don't know where, but it's likely it's going to change. I'm only bringing up this idea that there are things in the news that are going to be shifting. And Iowa, you may go, why? Well, Iowa? Look, Iowa's going through all kinds of changes, big changes. Have you heard about any of them? Have you read about any of them? Probably not. Just remember, if Iowa changes, there are a lot of other things in the country that are changing. Now, we're offering for, I think, the rest of August, $100 off Best Science Reports and Marketing Reports. If you want a discount code, let's talk to Mike. Mike, do we have one for the Best Science and Marketing?
It's going to be sent out. The summer stuff is going to be sent out this afternoon.
Okay. So guys, I'm just going to tell you, it's happening. I think we have the flash report, which we were offering, which is a small, very inexpensive demographic report. I just want to make sure people know we're going to do this for a very short time through the rest of August. But guys, the idea is now's the time to kind of make decisions. And the flash report's a really great, short, few-page demographic report that's not very expensive, that is a great way to get knowledge about what's happening out there. So guys, take advantage of it. Mike's Marketing Mastery course, you're still loading up for the fall, right?
Yep, 1st of September.
So guys, these fill up. So if you want to have success this fall, trust Mike. He is a brilliant young man, and I've had conversations, by the way, about him with other of our clients, and they're always saying, "Where'd you find Mike?" Well,
Seriously.
I don't know. He just kind of showed up at my doorstep one day and was begging for soup, but I'm just kidding. But anyway, Mike is a brilliant guy. And when it comes to this marketing mastery, now's the time to get planning. So, Mike, how do they sign up for the marketing mastery course?
So they just need to go right to the website, to the drdemographics.com, and that will go into the training tab. They can go right there to the course.
Okay. Now, I've got a couple of really big topics that are going to be coming up in the future that you don't want to miss. So please tell your friends and neighbors to sign up for these webinars and also see what we've got on our website. My thought is to give you content as much as we possibly can so you can figure out what's happening. And we're not charging. These are all free things, you know. The demographic reports, of course, are going to cost something because they cost us money to produce. But yeah, we want to make sure you're well prepared. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll talk to you sometime soon.